When my daughter looked me in the eyes and told me I needed to find somewhere else to live because she was selling my home, I felt my world crumble beneath my feet. 3 days later, I was sitting across from our family lawyer with documents that would change everything. That's when I realized life isn't a straight line. It's a chess game where even pawns can checkmate a queen. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're from in the comments. Because trust me, this story has more twists than a mountain road, and you'll want to be here for every turn. I always thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I imagined it as something dramatic, a husband with another woman, a friend stealing your life savings. I never expected it would come in the form of my daughter Julia's cold, calculating stare as she sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd cut her birthday cakes for 25 years. "Mom, we need to talk about the house," she said, stirring her coffee with deliberate precision. The morning light caught on her diamond wedding ring, the one her father had helped her husband pick out 3 years ago, before cancer took him. "What about it?" I asked, my heart already racing. Something in her tone had changed. My Julia, always warm and affectionate, suddenly seemed like a stranger sitting in my kitchen. "Now that Dad's gone, it makes financial sense to sell it. The market's good, and this place is too big for just one person." I blinked, unable to process her words. "This is my home, Julia. Your father and I built our life here." "Mom." Her voice was clipped, professional, the same tone she used with difficult clients at her law firm. "You're 60 years old. You should be thinking about downsizing anyway. Something easier to manage." "I don't want to downsize," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "This is where all our memories are." She sighed, impatient with my sentimentality. "Dad left his affairs in a mess. We need the money from this house. I've already spoken to a realtor." "You what?" The room started spinning. "This is my house too. Your father and I bought it together." Julia set down her spoon with a clink that seemed to echo through the kitchen. "Actually, Mom, the house was in Dad's name. And as his executor, I'm responsible for settling his estate. Script part separator ===. I froze, staring at my daughter as if she'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "That can't be right," I said, my voice trembling. "We bought this house together, 35 years ago." Julia pulled out a folder from her sleek leather briefcase. "I have the deed right here. Dad's name only." She slid the paper across the table. My hands shook as I looked at the document. There it was in black and white, Richard Miller, sole owner. How had I never known this? In 35 years of marriage, how had I missed something so fundamental? "I've already made an appointment with Sunset Village," Julia continued, pulling out a glossy brochure for a senior living facility. "It's very nice, Mom. They have activities, a small garden area. ULL Mac Friends. Sunset Village. E repeated, the name tasting bitter in my mouth." "You want to put me in a home? Like I'm some burden to be managed?" "Don't be dramatic," Julia sighed. "It's practical. The money from the house will pay for it, and there will still be plenty left for your retirement." "My retirement?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I was planning to retire in this house, Julia. The one I've spent decades turning into our home. Mom, please be reasonable." "Dad left things complicated. There are debts you don't know about." "What debts?" I demanded. "Your father and I didn't have debts." Julia's eyes shifted away from mine. "That's not entirely true. Look, you have 3 weeks to start packing. The realtor thinks we can list by the end of the month." 3 weeks. You're giving me an eviction notice? "De start de spine. I'm your mother, not some tenant." "This isn't personal," Julia said, standing up and snapping her briefcase closed. "It's business. Dad would understand." As she walked toward the door, I called after her, my voice breaking. "Your father would never throw me out of my own home." Julia paused, her back to me. "Dad did a lot of things you don't know about, Mom. Trust me on this, it's better for everyone if we sell quickly and quietly." The door closed behind her, leaving me alone in the sudden silence of my kitchen, a kitchen that, apparently, had never really been mine. Script part separator ===. I sat at that kitchen table long after Julia left, staring at the deed with Richard's name on it. My hands trembled as I traced his signature. 35 years of marriage, and I'd never once questioned whose name was on our house. Why would I? We were partners in everything. Or so I thought. That night, I couldn't sleep. Our bedroom, no, Richard's bedroom according to that document, felt like a museum of lies. Every photograph on the wall, every piece of furniture we'd picked together suddenly seemed like props in a play where I'd misunderstood my role. When the sun rose, I was still awake, my mind racing with questions. What debts was Julia talking about? Richard had always handled our finances, yes, but we discussed everything. Or had we? By mid-morning, I found myself driving to Williams & Partners, the law firm that had managed Richard's affairs for decades. I hadn't called ahead, but I needed answers. Mrs. Miller, Charles Williams greeted me, surprise evident in his weathered face. He'd been Richard's lawyer and friend for 40 years. I wasn't expecting you. I wasn't expecting to be evicted from my home by my daughter, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Charles's eyebrows shot up. Evicted? What are you talking about? I placed the deed on his desk. Did you know about this? That the house was only in Richard's name? He examined the document, frowning. Yes, of course. But Anna, surely you understand. Understand what? That my husband kept me off the deed to our home? That my daughter can legally throw me out now that he's gone? Charles looked uncomfortable. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it for me, Charles. Because I have 3 weeks before my daughter sells my home out from under me. He sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. Anna, there's something you should know about Richard's will. His will. My heart pounded. Julia said she's the executor. She is, Charles confirmed. But there's a sealed letter Richard left. For you. To be opened only if. If what? If Julia tried to sell the house. Script part separator, I stared at Charles, my mind struggling to catch up. A sealed letter? What does it say? Charles opened his desk drawer, removing an envelope with my name written in Richard's unmistakable handwriting. I don't know the specifics. Richard was very clear. This was for your eyes only, and only in this exact circumstance. My fingers trembled as I took it. The envelope felt heavy, like it contained more than just paper. Did Julia know about this letter? Charles shook his head. No. Richard was explicit that no one should know. I broke the seal and pulled out several folded pages. As I read, my breath caught in my throat. This changes everything, I whispered. Anna. What is it? I couldn't speak, just handed him the first page. Charles's eyes widened as he read. My God, he muttered. Richard had a second will drawn up. Not with our firm. Keep reading, I said. Charles flipped to the next page, his professional composure cracking. This house, it's not even part of the estate Julia's executing. Richard transferred ownership to a trust 3 months before he died. A trust in your name. And Julia doesn't know, I said, the realization dawning on me. No, Charles confirmed. The deed she showed you was outdated. I felt dizzy with relief, then anger surged through me. Why would Richard keep this secret? Why let me think? The letter explains that, Charles said gently. He suspected Julia might try something like this. I nodded, scanning Richard's handwritten pages. He writes that Julia came to him 6 months ago, asking for money. A lot of money. When he refused. She threatened to sell the house as soon as he was gone. Charles finished, reading ahead. My own daughter. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Charles handed the papers back to me. Anna, there's something else you should know. About the debts Julia mentioned. Script part separator, Charles leaned forward, lowering his voice. There are no debts, Anna. Richard's estate is completely solvent. More than solvent, it's quite substantial. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Then why would Julia lie about that? I can only speculate, Charles said carefully, but according to what Richard told me in our last meeting, Julia and her husband Tom are having financial difficulties. Serious ones. What kind of difficulties? The kind that come from living well beyond your means. They've mortgaged their home to the hilt, taken out personal loans. Tom's investment firm isn't doing well, but they keep up appearances. I thought about their lavish house in the suburbs, Julia's designer clothes, the luxury cars. Had it all been a facade? Richard refused to bail them out, Charles continued. He believed in earning your way. He thought giving Julia easy money would only enable her poor decisions. And now she thinks selling my house will solve her problems, I said bitterly. Charles nodded. The property is worth close to $1. $2 million in today's market. That would certainly ease their financial situation. I looked down at Richard's letter again, running my fingers over his familiar handwriting. My practical, thoughtful husband had protected me from beyond the grave. What do I do now, Charles? He smiled, a glint of something almost mischievous in his eyes. Well, Anna, that depends. Do you want Julia to know immediately that her plan won't work? Or would you prefer to see just how far she's willing to go? I thought about Julia's cold eyes as she handed me that brochure for Sunset Village. My daughter, who I'd raised with love and care, planning to cast me aside like an inconvenient heirloom. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with, I said, straightening my spine. I want to see how far my daughter will go to betray her own mother. Charles nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then let's not show our cards just yet. Script part separator, As I drove home from Charles's office, the weight of Julia's betrayal pressed on my chest like a stone. My own daughter. Planning to sell my home out from under me. Lying about her father's debts to justify it. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a strange car parked on the street, a sleek black Mercedes with rental tags. My heart raced when I saw Julia emerge from my front door, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit. I sat in my car, watching them. The man was gesturing toward the house, pointing at features, making sweeping motions with his hands. Julia was nodding, smiling. They hadn't noticed me yet. This was happening faster than I'd thought. Not even 24 hours since she delivered her ultimatum, and she already had a realtor walking through my home. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Every instinct told me to storm up there, wave Richard's letter in her face, tell her I knew about her financial troubles and her lies. But Charles's advice echoed in my mind, don't show your cards yet. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of my car. Mom. Julia's smile faltered when she saw me. I thought you'd be out longer. Clearly, I replied, looking pointedly at the stranger. This is Marcus Dean from Elite Properties, she said smoothly. He's just giving me some preliminary estimates. In my house. Without my permission. I kept my voice calm, though inside I was seething. Mrs. Miller, your home has exceptional potential, Marcus said, extending his hand. The location alone. Please leave, I interrupted. Now. Julia's face hardened. Mom, you're being ridiculous. This is happening whether you like it or not. You have no right. I have every right, she snapped. The deed is clear. This house belonged to Dad, and as executor, I'm following his wishes. Script part separator, And what wishes would those be? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. For a moment, Julia looked uncertain. You know Dad would want what's best for the family. Your father would want me homeless? I challenged. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps I should come back another time. No, Julia said firmly. Mom, stop making a scene. The market is hot right now, and we need to move quickly. I need to get something from inside, I said, pushing past them toward the front door. Marcus, would you mind waiting in your car? I heard Julia say behind me. I need a moment with my mother. I walked straight to the kitchen, my safe haven for 35 years. The room where I'd nursed Julia through childhood fevers, where Richard and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd celebrated birthdays and weathered storms. Julia followed me, closing the door behind her. Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Am I? I turned to face her. Tell me something, Julia. What debts was your father hiding from me? She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. It's complicated, she said. Dad made some investments that didn't pan out. What investments? Look, the details don't matter. What matters is selling this house quickly, before values drop. And sending me to Sunset Village, I added. It's a nice place, Mom. You'll be taken care of. Well, you'll be taken care of by the proceeds from my home, I said softly. Julia's cheeks flushed. That's not fair. I'm trying to do what's best for everyone. Including Tom? I asked. How is his investment firm doing these days? Her eyes widened slightly. That has nothing to do with this. Doesn't it? Script part separator, Doesn't it? I repeated, watching her closely. Julia's composure slipped for a moment, a flash of panic crossing her face before she recovered. Mom, I don't know what you think you know, but this isn't about Tom or me. It's about settling Dad's estate properly. I leaned against the counter, deliberately casual. I spoke with Evelyn Peterson last week, I lied, mentioning the wife of Tom's business partner. She was very concerned about you two. Julia paled visibly. She had no right to discuss our private matters with you. So there are private matters to discuss? I pressed. This is ridiculous, Julia snapped, retreating toward the door. You have 3 weeks, Mom. Start packing, or I'll have to hire people to do it for you. After she left with Marcus, I sat at the kitchen table, my hands shaking. The daughter I thought I knew had become a stranger before my eyes. But now I understood the game, and I had cards she didn't know about. The next morning, he called Charles. I need you to set up a meeting, I told him. With Julia and Tom. In your office. Are you sure? Charles asked. We could simply inform her about the trust. No, I replied. I want to see how far they'll go. Set it for next week. Tell them it's about finalizing the estate. While I waited for the meeting, Julia's realtor returned twice with potential buyers. I watched strangers walk through my home, pointing at my ceilings, opening my closets, discussing what walls they'd tear down. Each time, I smiled politely and said nothing. Meanwhile, I was doing research of my own. Charles had given me access to Richard's financial records, the real ones, not whatever fiction Julia had invented. What I found stunned me. There weren't just no debts. Richard had been quietly building a fortune I'd known nothing about. But more shocking were the bank transfers I discovered. 5 large withdrawals from our joint account over the past year, all made by Julia using the power of attorney Richard had given her when he first got sick. My daughter hadn't just been planning to sell my house. She'd been stealing from us for months. Script part separator, By the time the meeting with Charles arrived, I had armed myself with knowledge and evidence. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a simple black dress that Richard had always loved. Not the outfit of a woman about to be shipped off to a retirement home. When I walked into Charles's office, Julia and Tom were already seated across from his imposing mahogany desk. Julia looked irritated, Tom, nervous. His once handsome face had grown haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. Mom, Julia said coolly. I didn't expect you to be here. Didn't you? I kept my voice light. Charles is handling your father's estate. Why wouldn't I be involved? Charles cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. We have some important matters to discuss regarding Richard's will. We've been through the will already, Julia interrupted. I'm the executor. Everything is straightforward. Not quite everything, Charles replied, sliding a folder across the desk. There are some discrepancies we need to address. Tom shifted in his seat. What kind of discrepancies? For starters, I said, the 5 withdrawals totaling $175,000 that Julia made from my joint account with Richard over the past year. Julia's face drained of color. That was for Dad's medical expenses. Really? I opened a folder of my own. Because I have the hospital bills right here, paid directly from our insurance and Richard's personal account. So what exactly was that money for, Julia? Tom's head whipped toward Julia. You said your father gave you that money for our mortgage. He did. Julia insisted, but her voice had taken on a shrill quality I'd never heard before. Mom doesn't understand. I understand perfectly, I cut in. But what I don't understand is why you're so desperate to sell my home. Your home. Julia laughed bitterly. The house is part of Dad's estate. Charles smiled thinly. Actually, about that deed, script part separator, Charles smiled thinly. Actually, about that deed. He pulled out another document from his folder and slid it across the table. Julia snatched it up, her eyes scanning the page. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into the paper as her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "This can't be right," she whispered. "What is it?" Tom asked, leaning over to see. Julia's hands were shaking. It's a trust document. Dad transferred ownership of the house 3 months before he died. To whom? Tom demande. To Mom, Julia said, her voice hollow. The house belongs to Mom. It's not part of the estate at all. Tom slumped back in his chair, running his hands through his thinning hair. Jesus, Julia. You said this was a sure thing. Julia's eyes darted between us, calculating. There must be some mistake. Dad would have told me. Like you told me about the debts? I asked quietly. The ones that don't exist. Charles cleared his throat. There's more, I'm afraid. He pulled out another document. We've discovered irregularities in how Julia has been handling the estate. What kind of irregularities? Tom asked sharply. She's been liquidating assets without proper documentation, Charles explained. Specifically, Richard's investment portfolio. Julia's face had gone from pale to ashen. That was temporary. I was going to replace it after we sold the house. With the proceeds from selling my home, I finished for her. Money that was never going to Sunset Village, was it? It was going to bail out Tom's failing business. Julia shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. Dad wanted to help us. He knew about our situation. Is that why he specifically created a trust to protect the house from you? I asked. Is that why he left me this? I pulled Richard's letter from my purse and held it up. What is that? Julia demande. A letter from your father. Explaining exactly why he didn't want you touching the house, or getting any more of our money. Would you like to hear what he wrote about your spending habits? Or maybe about the gambling debts Tom's been hiding? Script part separator, Tom's face went white. What gambling debts? What is she talking about, Julia? Julia shot him a venomous look. She's making things up, trying to turn us against each other. Charles cleared his throat again. I'm afraid not. Richard hired a private investigator last year when he became suspicious about where all the money was going. He pulled out yet another file. The reports are quite detailed. The online poker accounts. The trips to Atlantic City charged to company credit cards. The loans from some concerning individuals. Tom looked like he might vomit. You told me your father was covering those loans. He was going to. Julia's composure was cracking. Once he saw how serious things were. He saw exactly how serious things were, I interrupted. That's why he protected me, and this house, from both of you. Julia turned on me, her eyes blazing. You have no idea what we've been going through. Dad's medical bills wiped out our savings, and Tom's business. Your father's medical bills were fully covered by insurance, Charles interjected. As Anna already pointed out. And my business would be fine if you hadn't insisted on that ridiculous house and the country club membership and the trips to Europe. Tom shouted at Julia. So this is my fault. Julia's voice rose to a screech. You're the one who lost our investment in that restaurant venture. You're the one who can't stay away from the poker tables. I watched them tear into each other, these two people who had been planning to throw me out of my home. In that moment, I felt nothing but pity. Enough, I said quietly. They both turned to look at me, seemingly surprised I was still there. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. I'm keeping my house. The $175,000 Julia stole will be repaid from her portion of Richard's actual estate. And if either of you ever try to pull something like this again, I'll press charges for financial elder abuse. Julia's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Is that clear? I asked. Tom nodded miserably. Script part separator, Charles produced one final document. There's the matter of the beach house, he said. Julia's head snapped up. What beach house? Your father purchased a vacation property in Maine 5 years ago, Charles explained. It's worth approximately $900,000. Dad bought a beach house? Julia looked stunned. Why didn't I know about this? Because he knew you'd try to take that too, I said simply. The property was intended as a surprise for Anna's 65th birthday, Charles continued. But given recent events, Richard included provisions to liquidate it immediately if necessary. Tom leaned forward eagerly. So it can be sold? Yes, Charles nodded. According to Richard's explicit instructions, it can be sold to cover any improprieties discovered after his death. Julia's eyes narrowed. Meaning what, exactly? Meaning the money you stole, the investment funds you've been draining, Charles said bluntly. The beach house will be sold, and those funds will be replaced. The remainder will go into a trust that Anna controls. You can't do this. Julia slammed her hand on the desk. It's already done, Charles replied calmly. The paperwork was filed yesterday. Julia turned to me, her expression suddenly pleading. Mom, please. We can work this out. You don't understand how difficult things have been. I understand perfectly, I cut her off. You were willing to throw your own mother away like garbage for money. That's not fair. Julia protested, tears welling in her eyes. Isn't it? You had 3 weeks to change your mind, to show a shred of compassion. Instead, you paraded strangers through my home and lied about your father's wishes. Julia looked to Tom for support, but he was staring at the floor, defeated. You have a choice now, I said. You can accept these terms, or we can take this to court. Charles has already prepared the lawsuit. Fraud, elder abuse, theft. The list is quite impressive. Script part separator, Julia stared at me, her face a battlefield of emotions, rage, disbelief, and underneath it all, the dawning realization that she'd lost. You wouldn't sue your own daughter, she whispered. I looked at her steadily. I wouldn't have thought my own daughter would try to make me homeless either. People surprise you. Tom had gone completely silent, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The terms are non-negotiable, Charles said, pushing a document toward them. Sign here, acknowledging the repayment plan and dropping any claim to the house. Julia's hand trembled as she picked up the pen. Dad set me up, she muttered. He never trusted me. He loved you, I corrected her. But he saw what your lifestyle was doing to you. He was trying to protect both of us. After they signed, Tom practically ran from the office. Julia lingered at the door, her face a mask of resentment. I hope you're happy now, she said bitterly. You were ruiné everything. No, Julia. You did that yourself. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam. Charles gathered the papers, a small smile playing at his lips. Richard would be proud of you, Anna. You stood your ground. Did I win? I asked, suddenly exhausted. Because it doesn't feel like winning. You protected yourself, he replied gently. Sometimes that's all we can do. 3 days later, I was sitting on my porch swing, the one Richard had built our first summer in the house, when a moving truck pulled up in front of Julia's house across town. I'd driven there on impulse, drawn by some maternal instinct I couldn't quite suppress. I watched from a distance as Julia directed movers, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a faded t-shirt. The for sale sign on their lawn told me everything I needed to know. They were downsizing, forced to live within their means at last. Part of me ached for her, my only child facing the consequences of her actions. Another part felt a green satisfaction. Sometimes lessons come at a steep price. I was about to drive away when Julia spotted my car. She froze for a moment, then walked slowly toward me. I rolled down my window, not sure what to expect. We're moving to an apartment, she said flatly. Tom's firm is bankrupt. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, and meant it. Are you? Her laugh was hollow. Is this what you wanted? To see us fall? I never wanted that, Julia. I wanted you to be honest. To remember that family means something. She looked away, blinking rapidly. Tom's been gambling for years. I kept covering for him, thinking I could fix it. Then when Dad got sick, you saw an opportunity, I finished for her. I saw a solution, she corrected, still not meeting my eyes. I told myself you'd be fine at Sunset Village. That Dad would understand. We stood in silence, the weight of everything between us. I don't expect you to forgive me, she finally said. Good, because I'm not ready to. But I am your mother, Julia. That hasn't changed. 2 months later, I was sitting in Charles's office again, signing the final paperwork from the sale of the beach house. After repaying what Julia had taken, there was still a substantial sum left. What will you do with it? Charles asked. I smiled, thinking of the small apartment where Julia and Tom now lived, of the entry-level job Tom had taken at an insurance company, of the humility that had begun to replace Julia's entitlement. I'm setting up a trust, I told him, for Julia's future children, with very specific conditions about financial responsibility. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't money, I added, thinking of Richard's wisdom in protecting me. It's the lessons we learn when everything else is stripped away. Charles nodded approvingly. And the house? Will you stay? Of course, I said, picturing my garden waiting for spring, the kitchen where I'd soon host new friends for dinner, the porch swing where I'd watched so many sunsets. It wasn't just walls and a roof. It was the life Richard and I had built together. The life I'd continue building, on my own terms. Some betrayals break you. Others reveal your true strength. As I walked out of Charles's office into the bright afternoon sun, I knew which kind mine had been.